Hi, welcome back to the Brown Boys podcast. This is Aditya.
I'm Jahnu.
We're seniors at Irvington High School. On this episode, we have a very special guest. We're honored to have Dr. Nirav Pandya on our podcast. He's a sports physician at UCSF. Dr. Pandya, do you want to tell us about yourself to start off?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks once again for having me. This sounds like a great podcast, and I'm really honored to be on it. As you mentioned, I work at UCSF. I'm an orthopedic surgeon who does primarily pediatric and adolescent sports medicine. And I have a research interest in athletes, professional athlete injuries as well, too. And I've been here out in the Bay Area for the past 10 years and have been working at UCSF for the past 9. So, yeah, I love my job. It's a great field, and excited to talk to more about it.
How was your experience growing up in the U.S., as an Indian American in the U.S.? How was your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. My parents immigrated to Chicago in the '70s. Like a lot of our, my generation of parents do. They were kind of the first generation here. My father, who passed away years ago, but he was a physician in Chicago. My mom stayed at home. So, like kind of the common story for a lot of us is that, my dad was a doctor, and my parents said, you can be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. That was the very traditional thing. But unlike a lot of my other people that I grew up with, I was very into sports, and I played a lot of sports growing up. I played basketball all throughout high school. I ran track and cross country, and actually ended up running track in college. And I think what kind of motivated me a lot was that I was one of the few Indian kids out there, playing sports very early in the in the '90s, and people were like, what are you doing out here? Like, why are you out here? Like, shouldn't you be doing math or science or things like that? So, I found kind of a way to continue, my drive. When I got to college, I felt very comfortable, being an athlete, being Indian American. But there are always, always people kind of looked at you and said like, this isn't the path you should be taking. And I always had an interest in science as well too. So that's kind of how I found my way to medical school in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine, was kind of combining my love for sports as well as science together. So it definitely is very kind of similar to the story of people my age, over 40, kind of trying to integrate in and feel like we're part of the American culture while still having Indian food at home and going to events and all those other things. But I think my experience was a little bit different because I was kind of that first group of Indian kids who were born here, who were playing sports and then played at the collegiate level. So I think it was a little unique in that sense. So I appreciate, people like Sean Desai, who's the defensive coordinator for the Bears now, kind of path that people like that have had to take to kind of, have a voice in professional sports.
I'm sorry, what college did you say you went to? I might have
I went to University of Chicago. So I went there in Chicago for both undergrad and medical school. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's nice.
Yeah, I think right now, everyone in our school is basically Asian.
We're in the college
So our
office right now.
experience is totally different than yours. Like everybody in our school looks like us. Like they have the same culture as us. So that's
Yeah.
pretty
They
different.
have the same statuses also for college applications.
No. Well, I think, I used to, for University of Chicago, I used to be an alumni interviewer for them. So I get a lot of students around here. And I think the most important thing that I used to tell people is that, there's no one path, in terms of like, you have to do X, Y, and Z. I think if you're passionate about what you want to do, at the end of the day, and this is coming from someone who like interviews now residents and fellows and medical students now, is that, if you're very like passionate about what you do, yeah, going to a certain college or certain school may open up more doors. But if you're passionate, you work hard, it's gonna come wherever you go to school. So I wouldn't stress too much about it. Just be passionate; it'll all work out. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Maybe I'll talk to your parents about that too.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I've always heard that med school is like really tough. How was your experience in med school? I mean, like as a doctor.
Yeah, they've changed a lot. Even with I have an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old too. So even how the way they're learning in school, I think school has changed a lot. And that a lot of when I was growing up, and I'm not that super old, I'm 42, is that it was a lot of memorization. Like you basically just got a whole bunch of stuff to memorize, and how good you did in school was how late you could stay up and how much you could memorize. But you didn't really learn how to think or integrate stuff. So medical school, especially the first 2 years, was a lot of just like how much could you memorize, how much stuff you could know. So I think it was tough because, in college, you have varying degrees of people who are kind of dedicated to it. But you get to med school, everyone wants to be a doctor. It's very competitive. So, people are doing ridiculous things like staying up till 4 a.m. and memorizing all that stuff. And I wanted to have a well-balanced life. Like I still felt like I want to memorize those stuff, but I didn't feel it was healthy. And I think that when you get to your third and fourth year medical school, then you start working with people and you start talking to them and you're able to integrate the information. And I found that part really easy because I like talking with people. I like kind of critically thinking. So I found that part easy, but just sitting there for hours those first 2 years, memorizing stuff and the competitive nature was difficult for me.
Yeah.
In terms of not that I found the material hard, but it was just kind of a little bit of a drag. They've
Yeah.
changed medical school a lot more where now they're trying to be like, look, that's not the best way to do it. We have to teach people how to talk to people, how to problem solve. So I think it's changed a lot. But I think for me, that was the part that I struggled with the most because I'm definitely a people person. And it was hard to just sit there for hours in the library memorizing facts.
Did you just have like 1,000 flashcards and you're just like reading through all of them?
Yeah, flashcards, multicolors, memorizing. Yeah, no, it was definitely tough. But I love what I do now, and I agree. Like for things like anatomy, like you have to memorize your anatomy. You can't like figure out, oh, where'd this muscle go? Let me kind of figure it out. You just have to kind of know it. So yeah, there are parts of it that you have to memorize, but I think it's a lot of medicine is about how you talk to people and let them know their options, and I think that's kind of where they're going more with training now.
That's good.
Yeah. So what exactly inspired you to become a sports
Oh, he
medicine
told us
physician?
it's because his sports, his athletic.
It definitely did, yeah. And I think that part of it was, I just had an interest in it. Like I spent my whole, high school, junior high school, like around people who are interested in sports. And I kind of naturally, even in med school, like the people who were interested in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine were the same kind of people I was hanging out with in junior high and high school, so I felt very comfortable in that. And for me, what's really important is, activity, movement, making sure people are healthy and out there, and being able to do that in medicine and get people back on the field or get them to be able to be active there's no greater joy for me. So, I could basically do with science what I was interested in. So I think that the combination of both things definitely really brought together. And I find that most orthopedic surgeons or sports medicine physicians had some connection to sports along the way. And it allows us to kind of be in an area and use our science at the same time.
So in the area you were growing up, like going to school, high school and stuff, did you have a lot of other Indian kids around you, or was it,
Yeah,
different?
there was. In Chicago, obviously a lot of families immigrated there as well too. So there's a large Indian community there. We had a decent number of high school kids in my high school who are Indian. Chicago is
Yeah.
has a very large South Asian community. So absolutely, there were a lot of
Okay, that's good.
people growing up there. So it's very similar to Fremont.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm saying because we live in the Bay Area and everywhere I go, it's only Indians and Asians. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think John's backstory is very similar. He's really interested in track and field. You want to ask him a few
Yeah,
questions
I'm actually
about
doing track there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I actually did it last year. I mean, so I tried doing it sophomore year, but it got canceled because of COVID. And then, so last year it was a shorter season, but it was a good experience. So I should be doing this year also.
Yeah, I mean, track's a great sport. Part of it, and this kind of does tie a little bit back to when I talked about growing up, as an Indian American, is that, for a lot of the team sports, I always found it was a little bit of struggle in basketball and things like that because, they hadn't seen someone like me play basketball before. So even if I could shoot well or do things like that, and, I'm 5'6", I'm not big, but, they just didn't understand. They're like, oh, there's all this preconception that like, look, you shouldn't be playing basketball. We haven't seen Indian people play basketball before. But for track, it was very easy because if you ran fast,
Yeah.
you had time, you jumped far, like, so there was no like, okay, well, we have to put you, on varsity or things like that because you're doing it. So I think I love running and things like that, but I think maybe that's part of the reason why I gravitated towards the sport because then it was suddenly like, you're not the Indian kid who's trying to make the basketball team. It's like, you're just the person who could run and jump fast or farther.
I think that's why I gravitated towards it too, to be honest.
Yeah. It's very tangible. There's not much like,
Yeah.
it's not very subjective where it's like, well, maybe you fit better or maybe not. It's like, you put me on the relay because I'm running the fastest, so sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Also, track has a lot more events too, so it's also much more spread out. What events did you do when you were in high
I was,
school and college?
I was a triple and long jumper.
I
And
did
then
triple long jump too.
there you go. There you go. It's great events. And then I was a 400-meter runner as well too. So in college, I ran the 400 and triple and long jump. So I love it. They're great events.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And, people think of it as an individual sport, but you spend so much time with your team as well too. You got, track meets and things like that. So even though the performances may have been individual, like I think it really was a team because you spent so much time with your team, practicing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm only into watching sports, playing sports, doing my thing.
He's more
Yeah.
of a cricketer. He plays cricket. He used to play a lot of cricket when he was
Oh,
younger.
you
Nice,
still like
nice.
cricket?
Cricket, I played, it's a funny story about cricket. So speaking of growing up Indian, so, I played Little League. My parents didn't really know what baseball was. So I was second grade and they sent me to my first Little League practice with a cricket bat, which it did not go very well. So, it was, one of those kind of classic, immigrant stories where my parents wanted me to be involved. They're like, "Oh, just take this," and I was like, "Okay, whatever, I'll bring it." And yeah, I remember that practice very vividly, getting made fun of. So it was, but I did, I remember playing cricket with my dad in the front yard. He would, throw it to me, and I still kind of peripherally follow cricket a lot, particularly when some of the big matches are happening. But it's, there I have, I think I have some kids down in Fremont as well too. Every now and then I'll see my clinic who play cricket at a high level, and there are more and more college cricket teams popping up here. So
Yeah.
it's been bigger and bigger. Yeah.
I think there's a U.S. under 19 team now too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
somebody in our school's in the U19 team. That's actually
Yeah,
pretty
there
fun.
actually is. Yeah, there are a few people.
Great. Yeah. So hopefully it'll start growing. It's a great sport. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as an Indian American growing up in the U.S., when we're often pressured to pursue the med field or technology field, what do you have to say to people that are pressured to become doctors, even if they don't want to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think part of it, part of the pressure obviously comes from our parents, and I think that raising my kids are a little bit younger than yours, but I think that it's part of it is like, at the end of the day, especially with the way medicine or any field is right now, like if you're not happy doing it, then you're not going to succeed in it. I've seen a lot of people who end up going into medicine because that's the path that they feel, and suddenly they get their like 5 or 6 years into practice, and they're like, "Look, I don't enjoy this anymore," and then they leave medicine. And the tough thing about medicine is that once you've kind of gone along that path and you decide to go out, it's not like when you're a lawyer, you can go like 10 different ways. There's very limited options afterwards. So I think that especially now, there's so many more paths to success. And I think it's just changing what is success. I mean, is it making a lot of money? Is it, being happy and things like that? So I think that it's about, if you're happy and you enjoy what you do, all the other financial stuff will take care of itself. Um, so I think that there's still that pressure to kind of think that being a doctor is prestigious. But I think now there's, especially with like even people, how way people perceive college or what's successful with tech and things like that. I think there's so many different paths to being successful now. And yeah, I think being a doctor, lawyer, engineer isn't the only path right now. And I think that, especially, I think this next generation of kind of parents who aren't, may have immigrated or or like myself, who were born here and then have kids, are starting to realize that a little bit now. So at least with some of the younger patients that I see, I don't think there's as much pressure right now for that. I think I think the kids actually put more pressures on themselves sometimes, that the feel that like I have to be successful because I see all my other peers doing it, as opposed to when I was growing up, it was our parents who were the ones who were pushing us.
I mean, obviously, I'm a very big fan of the Warriors. So how did you like become affiliated with them? How did that like take off?
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm just a fan, so you definitely no formal medical affiliation with them. So it's kind of nice because I can kind of talk, give my perspective as a sports medicine physician about what I see. And I think with, particularly with the Warriors, I've always been, since I moved out to the Bay Area, I needed a team. I'm from Chicago. When I was in Philly, I kind of followed the 76ers a little bit, but I came out here. It kind of came at the ideal time because right when Curry and Clay kind of got drafted and were playing, 2-3 years after I've been here, the Warriors won their first championship. So it was just kind of like in the area, kind of becoming a Warriors fan. And, unfortunately, I don't want to have stuff to talk about with Clay and Curry with his injuries and Wiseman and stuff like that. But, I think for a lot of fans, one of the things I realized with sports medicine is, we hear these injuries all the time. And for a lot of fans, it's hard to understand like the general basics of what to expect and what the injury is. And that's what I do every day with my patients. They have an injury, I explain it to them so they understand it. So I found like, look, I love professional sports. People are passionate about their team. So why don't I kind of help to explain, kind of what's going on in relation to kind of what information is out there, publicly for me to comment on. So I see my role is to kind of explain. I'm a fan too. So I try to combine those two things to make sports enjoyable for people. So they're not wondering, when's Clay coming back, or when's Wiseman going to come back? And I can say, look, in general, for Achilles, injuries or meniscus injuries, this is what we expect. And so people can have more reasonable expectations.
So I actually had a question about injuries too. So I mean, personally, since I do track, I also tend to get injured a lot. So do you have any like tips on how I can prevent them, or like stretching or anything like that specifically?
Yeah, I think in general for any kind of sport where you're doing something repetitively, I think number one is like if you have pain somewhere, like if something's hurting, is to respect that area and not like overdo it. So sometimes probably the best prevention is sometimes doing a little bit less in practice, not necessarily taking practice off. So like you get to Tuesday and you're like, look, my shins are a little bit hurt. Let me do a little bit less next week, the next couple of days, so I can get ready for the meet. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think icing is a huge part of it. I think a lot of people forget to do that. You come home, you got homework, you have other things like sticking an ice bag on the area that's sore. And then I think making sure you're doing a good cool down is important. A lot of times you do your practice, you things like that, and everyone's like, okay, let me just jog a lap to cool down. And taking that extra 10 to 15 minutes to stretch and cool down is really important. And then I think the last thing is making sure you have the right shoes. So that means, sometimes, making sure you're changing your shoes, if your shoes don't feel right, getting new pairs. Cause I think there's no one brand of shoe that's the best for you. But I think if a shoe feels good on you, then it's probably gonna be the best shoe for you. Sometimes people, especially in track, want to get the spikes that look the nicest or the shoes.
Yeah, that's me. You're describing me.
The best color. And sometimes the like plain white spikes that don't look super cool, but they feel really well are the best for you. So I think all those things are important. And I think track more than anything else, because you're constantly stressing your body a lot. It's important to kind of, recognize when you're tired or you haven't slept a lot, and then, kind of cutting down the intensity for a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. I should do that. I always, I get shin splints a lot when I'm doing jumps, especially, and I just can't continue like jumping on that same foot without giving myself a break. So that probably doesn't help at all.
Yeah, I think taking little breaks sometimes, not doing as much plyometrics and stuff is really key. Yeah.
So I have a question about orthopedics also. So if I could say, because I might go into the medical field, I'm considering it. So for orthopedics particularly, if I try to consider doing it, what should I be interested in right now, or what should I consider majoring?
Yeah, so I think in general, I think you can. I think majoring in anything is fine. Like you want to. I think college is the last time you'll kind of get a chance to take multiple different classes and things like that. But I think it's getting experiences in the different parts of the field. So that means maybe shadowing an athletic trainer, going to a physical therapy office, seeing a surgeon who, may want to shadow and things like that. So I think just getting all the different angles of kind of orthopedic surgery. And then I think it's important to kind of maybe get a little taste of what research is like, when you're in the first couple of years of college. It's like, look at someone who's maybe doing some sort of research and kind of getting a sense of the field. So you kind of get a sense of what's happening clinically and what's happening, kind of in the various parts of it, like how we do it day to day. But I think the most important thing is just major in what you're interested in. Because I think medicine is not what you learn in undergrad may give you a little bit of basis of it, but I had friends in medical school who were English majors, were art majors, and they got to medical school and they learned the science, so you'll learn it, one way or the other. So find something you enjoy. The important thing about college is learning how to analyze and write and critically problem solve. And once you learn those tools, you'll learn the science at some point. So I think that's the important thing. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jahnu, I think he wanted to become a physician's assistant. He was talking to me about it.
Yeah, I was considering, because I heard that it's not as hard as like becoming a doctor, but it's still in the field and still does a lot of good work. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about a physician assistant?
Yeah, I think they're critical to how we, kind of how we deliver care, and I think our physician assistants are great that work with us at UCSF over at Children's. You have a lot of responsibility. You get to really know a specific area. And feel like they assist in surgery, they see patients in clinic by themselves. They can do a lot of things that we can do, and really get to know a field. So I think it's a great area. The training's a little bit different because it's not there's not as much ultimate responsibility in terms of who is the final say in terms of patient care. But I think it's great. It's an area where you can get a very similar experience as we do as kind of full MDs or DOs. But it's a great field, and it's very hands-on, and it's great. I think that's a great way to get involved. And I think that's another kind of area where if you have time in college to be like, hey, let me find a physician assistant. Let me just, spend a couple days with them and see what they do.
So is the pathway for a physician like just how there's med school for like if you want to become a doctor? Is there a different kind of a school to become a physician assistant?
Yeah, I think my understanding, if I remember correctly, is that you do undergrad, and then usually a physician assistant school is 2 to 3 years. Then you do some rotation. So it's definitely a little bit quicker than medical school. But I think a lot of medical school you're learning a lot of general stuff, and physician assistant school is kind of more honed in on what you have to do. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all the questions we have, Dr. Pandya. Thank you so much again for being on our podcast. Thank you to all our viewers for watching this. Make sure to go and follow Dr. Pandya on Twitter and all of his socials, and make sure to check us out as well. Thank you so much.
Maybe you can try getting us tickets to the next Warriors game or something.
I'm sure once Clay comes back, tickets will be expensive. But yeah, absolutely. When you guys are finished up with it, I can absolutely share it on social as well too. So yeah,
that'll be great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Send me a message and I'll send it out. Yep. Okay. All right. We guys don't work too hard tonight. Okay. Get some rest. Okay. All right. You guys take care. Okay? No problem.
Bye.